If you've been following the PC space recently, there's been a lot of discussion about some of these RTX cards having issues, dying, anything like that. Well, hello, my name is Jay, and welcome back to my Tech Vault. And today we're going to be talking about that. We're going to be talking about what causes a graphics card to die. Now, there are, in quite simple terms, a lot of reasons why this can happen. Heck, I've got a couple that I've had die. I've had some that I've bought that have had artifacts, some used ones. Thank God my 1080 Ti has not had that issue just yet. But this is kind of out of my dead computer shrine. If you don't know, my motherboard pretty much decided it was going to crap itself. And after I updated the BIOS on it, and I'm in the process of looking for a new motherboard. So over here is my shrine for my dead PC. And we're just going to leave that there. It's my shrine. So we're just going to cry in peace. But today we're going to talk about really what causes a graphics card to die, because there are quite a few things. So first off, one of the big things that ends up causing issues, especially maybe fresh out of the box, is manufacturing errors. So sometimes there are a couple things. First off, this can be the GPU die itself. If you're unfamiliar with any bit of a graphics card, there is actually a GPU die, and then there are separate bits of memory. It's pretty much like a mini computer, the way to think of it. It's got its own processor, and I'm using quotation marks. This is very, very nice layman's terms. You've got RAM, which is much faster than common day RAM because it needs to do a lot of just simple terms. We're going to stick to that today. And so sometimes what happens is there'll be little manufacturing errors. Sometimes these don't manifest themselves until after a little bit of degradation. Sometimes when you start overclocking, or sometimes when you turn up the boost clock and the automatic overclocking starts reaching a certain point, they start to manifest. So, what happens? Well, it looks like artifacting. If you're unfamiliar with that looks like, it's pretty much a bunch of Egyptian symbols. That's what I think they look like. Honestly, that's not really the name for them, but I think they look like, the classic Egyptian, like, what's the right word? Good luck charms. I am not any bit of history person, but I think that's what they look like. And they like to manifest themselves like that. Obviously, there are another long list of symptoms, I cannot say anything today, symptoms that really point to that, but for a majority it is usually artifacting that is straight out of the box. And then there are a couple more things we'll get to later that also could be manifesting as a graphics card failure. So, of course, out of the box, it could have some manufacturing defect. And of course that manufacturing defect is going to cause issues and pretty much require you to send your whole graphics card back. Now, one of my poor friends decided that he was going to buy a pre-built from, I believe, CyberPower. He goes and buys the pre-built, spends a whole lot of money on a 2080 Ti system from CyberPower, which, don't get me started. I asked him why I couldn't build it. We're just not going to talk about that. I'm pretty upset at that. But he gets it back, and CyberPower quality assurance said, no, we ain't worried about it. And what happens? The first day he gets it, he turns on, and he's got artifacts absolutely everywhere. So, what does that mean? Well, that means that my poor friend is going to either have to deal with CyberPower to try to get that fixed, or send it back to the manufacturer, which, honestly, the manufacturer warranty would have been so much easier had it been a assembled do-it-yourself computer. I'm not going to lie there, but I'm sorry, I'm off on a tangent here. So that's an example of how it can manifest. Now the next reason why a graphics card may die is because of the cooling. So if you're unfamiliar, high voltages, overclocking, which is why overclocking gets this bad rep, high voltages and high heat cause degradation in the circuits. It basically slowly breaks down, and as I said, this is layman's terms, guys. Everyone's going out in the comments. That's not really how it's layman's terms. With high voltages and high heat, it breaks down some of the connections in the GPU die itself, therefore it starts to break down and of course run into issues where then you get defects that may not have necessarily been from the manufacturer, but they do eventually show up. Now, how do you avoid this, I guess? And overclocking gets this bad rep kind of because this is because overclocking is, yes, a little bit bad because it can damage circuits if done incorrectly, but when you have an adequate cooling and you are not substantially putting way too much voltage in there, there's a quite safe range that does not really cause much degradation if you have enough cooling. If you don't have enough cooling, you can simply damage your circuits quite easily, and it's not that difficult to do. So, cooling is quite important. Even with having a hot CPU, a really hot CPU, can also damage it. Not CPU, what am I saying? It's GPU. A really hot GPU can cause problems. And most notoriously are the blower style cards, which is of course why I have one. But I like the way that the Founders Edition look. That's pretty much the only justification why I got that card. But for high heat cards, especially the Founders Editions, which I'm going to call myself out for this one, Founders Edition cards actually, of course, run a little bit hotter. This is they run at 85 degrees, and obviously the Turbo Boost kicks off there. I know it's not the name for it either. That's Intel that has the Turbo Boost, but the Hyper Boost clock speed, whatever you like to call it, shuts off. But still, at that kind of heat range, is slowly over time does a little bit more damage than a card that's running at 60 degrees in under load compared to the 85. And so over time, that running at constant load, running at full voltage, running at max heat levels, you start to get degradation. That's why when the Ethereum miners decided that they were going to mine on the cards, and we had that massive influx of those used miner cards, we ran into a lot of people saying, oh yeah, don't buy the miner card, you're going to regret it and they're going to break. And while there was a lot of truth to that, some of the ways that I think that was worded was not properly correct. But it is a good example, and it's something to consider, is when you buy used cards, you don't know how well the card was pushed, how hard the card was run. So really it comes down to depend on how the person before you treat it. If you've got a really nice air-cooled card that keeps it nice and cool, that is a little less likely to run into issues rather than a Founders Edition card. With a Founders Edition card, yes, may have been run 24/7, the same as a nice custom board partner cooled card compared to a Founders Edition card. The board partner card, of course, will be running cooler, so it will probably be a little bit healthier, if that's the right way to put it, healthier than the Founders Edition card or the blower style card. So really what it comes down to is there's quite a few things that really affect how long a graphics card can last. Obviously taking good care of it, dusting it, cleaning it, preventing any shortages just from dust or buildup or anything like that. Just keep your stuff clean. That goes pretty much for all life advice, guys. Keep your stuff clean. Make sure that you take good care of your stuff, and also keep an eye out if something looks off. Maybe you've got like some water dripping in your custom loop. That's also something to consider. I know it shouldn't be a problem, but just keep an eye out. That's another reason why cards die. But for the most part, it's going to be just keeping your cards cool. So there's a couple ways you can do that. Of course, you can get a custom cooler. You can actually buy a cooler. Someone might be liquid cooling, and you could get a really nice air cooler from one of the board partner cards. So look into that. And then if you're like me and just like the way that the Founders Edition looks, good for you. And don't be afraid of what other people say. But thank you guys very much for watching. Hope you have a wonderful day. And I will hopefully have somewhat of a computer. I'm probably going to have to reorganize, because as you can tell, my whole room is a mess. I've torn everything apart trying to send the board back for the RMA process, and I apologize about that, but at least I've got a decent computer to edit on, so I'm not too concerned. But thank goodness I have a backup computer. And as always, thank you guys very much for watching. If you enjoyed today's video, if it was helpful in any way, give it a thumbs up. And as always, check out the channel for other cool tech-related news, reviews, builds, etc. Have a good night. I was going to say have a good night, but have a good life. Goodbye.